My darling philosophers, welcome to our daily devotional reading. I hope you are well. It's been a while. The words are in my head. I don't know why. It's been a while. It's been too long since we've gathered together in peace and harmony. Holding hands around the sacred flame. And until such time as our hands and eyes apparently can meet again. Let's gather virtually around the sacred flame that has been passed down to us through the ages. The flame of thinking, feeling, searching, longing, wandering, being human, in search of something divine, in search of something holy to explain this, the sense of awe in our being, in our hearts. And so here we are gathering digitally at this make-believe monastery around the flame, the fire that is the words, the logos, found in and through Plato. On this Sunday morning. Suppose then that you and I endeavor to instruct and inform them what is the nature of this affection which they call being overcome by pleasure, and which they affirm to be the reason why they do not always do what is best. When we say to them, friends, you are mistaken and are saying what is not true, they would probably reply, Socrates and Protagoras, if this affection of the soul is not to be called being overcome by pleasure, pray what is it, and by what name would you describe it? But why, Socrates, should we trouble ourselves about the opinion of the many, who just say anything that happens to occur to them? I believe, I said, that they may be of use in helping us to discover how courage is related to the other parts of virtue. If you are disposed to abide by our agreement that I should show the way in which, as I think, our recent difficulty is most likely to be cleared up, do you follow? But if not, never mind. I know. You are quite right, he said, and I would have you proceed as you have begun. Well then, I said, Let me suppose that they repeat their question. What account do you give of that which, in our way of speaking, is termed being overcome by pleasure? I should answer thus. Listen, and Protagoras and I will endeavor to show you. When men are overcome by eating and drinking and other sensual desires which are pleasant, and they, knowing them to be evil, nevertheless indulge in them, would you not say that they were overcome by pleasure? They will not deny this, and suppose that you and I were to go on and ask them again, in what way do you say that they are evil? That they are pleasant and give pleasure at the moment, or because they cause disease and poverty and other like evils in the future? Would they still be evil if they had no attendant evil consequences, simply because they give the consciousness of pleasure of whatever nature? Would they not answer that they are not evil on account of the pleasure which is immediately given by them, but on account of the after consequences, diseases and the like? I believe, said Protagoras, that the world in general would answer as you do. And in causing diseases, do they not cause pain? And in causing poverty, do they not cause pain? They would agree to this also, if I am not mistaken. Protagoras assented. Then I should say to them, in my name and in yours, do you think them evil for any other reason, except because they end in pain and rob us of other pleasures? There again they would agree. We both of us thought that they would. And then I should take the question from the opposite point of view and say, friends, when you speak of goods being painful, do you not mean remedial goods, such as gymnastic exercises and military service and the physician's use of burning, cutting, drugging, and starving? Are these the things which are good but painful? They would assent to me. He agreed. And do you call them good because they occasion the greatest immediate suffering and pain, or because afterwards they bring health and improvement of the bodily condition and the salvation of states and power over others and wealth? They would agree to the latter alternative, if I am not mistaken. He assented. Are these things good for any other reason except that they end in pleasure and get rid of and avert pain? Are they looking to any other standard but pleasure and pain when they call them good? They would acknowledge that they were not. We all see who wrote footnotes to this part, right? I think so, said Protagoras. And do you not pursue after pleasure as a good and avoid pain as an evil? He assented. Then you think that pain is an evil and pleasure is a good, and even pleasure you deem an evil, when it robs you of greater pleasure than it gives, or causes pains greater than the pleasure. If, however, you call pleasure an evil in relation to some other end or standard, you will be able to show us that standard, but you have none to show. I do not think that they have, said Protagoras. And have you not a similar way of speaking about pain? You call pain a good when it takes away greater pains than those which it has, and gives pleasure greater than the pains. Then if you have some standard other than pleasure and pain to which you refer when you call actual pain a good, you can show that what that is, but you cannot. True, said Protagoras. Suppose again, I said, that the world says to me, why do you spend many words and speak in many ways on this subject? That's cool, nice. Why do you spend so many words and speak in many ways on this subject? Well, excuse me, my friends, I should reply. But in the first place, there is a difficulty in explaining the meaning of the expression, overcome by pleasure. And the whole argument turns upon this. And even now, if you see any possible way in which evil can be explained as other than pain, or good as other than pleasure, you may still react. Are you satisfied then at having a life of pleasure which is without pain? If you are, and if you are unable to show any good or evil which does not end in pleasure and pain, hear the consequences. If what you say is true, then the argument is absurd which affirms that a man often does evil knowingly, when he might abstain, because he is seduced and overpowered by pleasure. Or again, when you say that a man knowingly refuses to do what is good, because he is overcome at the moment by pleasure. And that this is ridiculous will be evident if only we give up the use of various names, such as pleasant and painful, and good and evil. As there are two things, let us call them by two names. First good and evil, and then pleasant and painful. Assuming this, let us go on to say that a man does evil knowing that he does evil. But someone will ask, why? Because he is overcome is the first answer. And by what is he overcome? The inquirer will proceed to ask, and we shall not be able to reply by pleasure, for the name of pleasure has been exchanged for that of good. In our answer, then, we shall only say that he is overcome. By what? He will reiterate. By the good, we shall have to reply. Indeed, we shall. Nay, but if our questioner will rejoin with a laugh, if he be one of the swaggering sort, that is too ridiculous that a man should do what he knows to be evil when he ought not, because he is overcome by good. Is that, he will ask, because the good was worthy or not worthy of conquering the evil? And in answer to that we shall clearly reply, because it was not worthy, for if he had been worthy, then he who, as we say, was overcome by pleasure, would not have been wrong. But how, he will reply, can the good be unworthy of the evil, or the evil of the good? Is not the real explanation that they are out of proportion to one another, either as greater and smaller or more and fewer? This we cannot deny, and when you speak of being overcome, what do you mean, he will say, but that you choose the greater evil in exchange for the lesser good? Admit it. And now substitute the names of pleasure and pain for good and evil, and say, not as before that a man does what is evil knowingly, but that he does what is painful knowingly, and because he is overcome by pleasure which is unworthy to overcome. What measure is there of the relations of pleasure to pain other than excess and defect, which means that they become greater and smaller and more and fewer and difficult in degree? For if anyone says, yes, Socrates, but immediate pleasure differs widely from future pleasure and pain, to that I should reply, and do they differ in anything but in pleasure and pain? There can be no other measure of them. And do you, like a skillful weigher, Put into the balance the pleasures and the pains and their nearness and distance, and weigh them and then say which outweighs the other. If you weigh pleasure against pleasure, you of course take the more and the greater, or if you weigh pains against pains, you take the fewer and the less. Or if pleasure against pains, then you choose the course of action in which the painful is exceeded by the pleasant, whether the distant by the near or the near by the distant. And you avoid that course of action in which the pleasant is exceeded by the painful. Would you not admit, my friends, that this is true? I am confident that they cannot deny this. He agreed with me. Well then, I shall say, if you agree so far, be so good as to answer me a question. Do not the same magnitudes appear larger to your sight when near, and smaller when at a distance? They will acknowledge that. And at the same halls of thickness and number also sounds, which are in themselves equal, are greater when near, and lesser when at a distance. They will grant that also. Now suppose happiness to consist in doing or choosing the greater, and in not doing or in avoiding the less. What would be the saving principle of human life? Would not the art of measuring be the saving principle? Or with the power of appearance? Is not the latter that deceiving art which makes us wander up and down and take the things at one time, of which we repent at another, both in our actions and in our choice of things great and small? But the art of measurement would do away with the effect of appearances, and showing the truth would vain teach the soul at last to find rest in the truth, and would thus save our life. Would not mankind generally acknowledge that the art which accomplishes this result is the art of measurement? Yes, he said, the art of measurement. Suppose again the salvation of human life to depend on the choice of odd and even, and on the knowledge of when a man ought to choose the greater or less, either in reference to themselves or to each other, and whether near or at a distance, and what would be the saving principle of our lives? Would not knowledge, a knowledge of measuring, when the question is one of excess and defect, and a knowledge of number, when the question is of odd and even? The world will assent, will they not? Protagoras himself thought that they would. Well then, my friends, I say to them, seeing that the salvation of human life has been found to consist in the right choice of pleasures and pains, in the choice of the more and the fewer, and the greater and the less, and the nearer and the remoter, must not this measuring be a consideration of their excess and defect and equality in relation to each other? This is undeniably true. And this, as possessing measure, must undeniably also be in art and science, techne and episteme. I imagine, because science is also translated as knowledge in the other translation, and it's always, when they differ between science and knowledge, it's always episteme. So art and science. Art and knowledge. The nature of that art or science/knowledge will be a matter of future consideration. But the existence of such a science furnishes a demonstrative answer to the question which you asked of me and Protagoras. At the time when you asked the question, if you remember, both of us were agreeing that there was nothing mightier than knowledge, and that knowledge, in whatever existing, must have the advantage of the pleasure and all other things. And then you said that pleasure often got the advantage, even over a man who has knowledge. And we refused to allow this, and you rejoined, O Protagoras and Socrates, what is the meaning of being overcome by pleasure if not this? Tell us what you call such a state. If we had immediately and at the time answered ignorance, you would have laughed at us. But now in laughing at us, you will be laughing at yourselves. If you also admitted that men err in the choice of pleasures and pains, that is, in the choice of good and evil, from defect of knowledge, I don't know how to pronounce that, lack of knowledge, and you admitted further that they err not only from lack of knowledge in general, but of that particular knowledge which is called measuring. Measuring, I should have looked into that word. What exactly? And you are also aware that the erring act, which is done without knowledge, is done in ignorance. This, therefore, is the meaning of being overcome by pleasure. Ignorance, and that is the greatest. And our friends Protagoras and Prodicus and Hippias declare that they are the physicians of ignorance, but you who are under the mistaken impression that ignorance is not the cause, and that the art of which I am speaking cannot be taught, neither go yourselves nor send your children to the sophist, who are the teachers of these things. You take care of your money and give them none, and the result is that you are the worse off, both in public and private life. Thus far our scripture of the day. Socrates quite steel manning the case of the sophist here. Ignorance being our only sin, and our only salvation being knowledge. I did not record again yesterday because I ended up spending the whole day with my friend. But I did read before I went. The first thing I underlined and marked was, for Plato, pure mathematics could lead to spiritual awakening, to gnosis. practical experience knowledge, remember I'm translating as I read, are being supplemented with pure intellectual knowledge, redelijk, knowledge of the mind. And this is the from mythos to logos thing, from Apollo, from Dionysus to Apollo. There is something in this being overcome by pleasure. Because for the Greeks, usually when they are being overcome by something, they are enthused. They are filled with a god, be it the god Eros or the god Ares, the god of war and anger, or Hephaestus and suddenly they create art, or Dionysus, and it's so beautiful in Dutch, but it doesn't quite have the same rhythm and alliteration in English. De god van wijn en waanzin. De god van de wijn en de waanzin. The god of the wine and the madness, Dionysus. The chapter ends because it goes into depth into the mystery religions. But then at the end it mentions that the gnosis are actually set against this. The ecstatic spirituality of the mystery religions. And I find that strange. Because gnosis, the first, they mention five, kenmerken, five, what it is. And it's a direct, freeing experience knowledge is the first thing. And for me, the mysteria, the ecstatic spirituality, seems to be a path to that. As is, though, the other two that they reject, definitely the covenant spirituality, that being devoted to a particular god or goddess, for me then Sophia. So for me, rather, they do say it's a new type of spirituality, gnosis, and not a spirituality in its own, not a religion in its own. And the other one is servant spirituality. And though I have been told not to kneel, and I'm glad to hear that he did not kneel either. There is service in how we interact with the divinity to whom we are devoted. And then the second thing of gnosis, they say, is the healing rituals. The third thing, the godly spark that is in every person, the divine fire. Fourth thing is always contra established norms and religion. And the fifth thing is quite a mix of stuff. That's according to this book, the Geen merken. Oh man, I know this. Never mind. I have here, show me heaven. Something that was written reminded me of that song. Here I go. I'm trembling just like a leaf. Because the view, Mainspield, the anthropology, the view of what the human is, of the mysteria, I find very interesting. I will find a way to connect it. Oh, the ignorance, because we need knowledge. How do we get knowledge? The essential identity of the human being is nous, according to the mysteries, the mysteria. So mind, also known as consciousness. The Dutch word is bewustzijn, which is consciousness. The mystery religions take the subjective experience as point of entry. But the body and soul comes and goes and can't have an experience of this ultimate. So it has to be this nous, this mind in the human that has this experience. And then the last sentence of this paragraph. The human is nous, mind, consciousness. That is soms is the Dutch. Sometimes that sometimes feels itself conscious of the body. The soul and the body is what we seem to be. Nous is what we truly are. The true self. And then it goes into how the individual and the collective is connected. In that nous is one. Mind is one. The common core of all humanity, of all people, is nous. The problem is, how do we access that nous? Because, coming back to today's text, how on earth do we know what is the greater good? What would lead to the greatest pleasure? Let's just take, for instance, that the good life, the happy life, is one with greater pleasure and less pain. But how do we know? Because it's one thing weighing one options in the moment, this or that. And some things seem to be clear. It is probably better to take the pain of the prick in my arm than the potential illness that's going to come if I don't get it. But it's not always that easy to do the calculations. In fact, I would argue it's mostly, when you really look at the big picture, it's impossible. It's impossible to do the calculations. We do not have a God's eye view. We do not have the view from nowhere. We do not see where every decision would lead to. Sometimes doing the right thing leads to disastrous consequences. And sometimes the opposite. So how do we choose? Let's just suppose for a moment that we have a choice. Just play along, okay? How do we choose? Weighing all options is not an option because we do not have the capacity for that. So are we screwed? Yes and no. Yes and no. There's something in embracing uncertainty. And maybe that is how we connect to the nous. By sinking so deep into ourselves. I'm going to read this as the nous. I wasn't sure, I didn't mark it even, if I would read it. My heart was re-enkindled. It was only from the motion of my heart that I understood that he was present. So I'm going to read this as if it's speaking of the nous, of the mind, of the one. I ascended beyond what was highest in me, and look, the word was still above that. As an avid investigator, I descended to my lowest depths, and nevertheless discovered them still further down. If I looked to the outside, I found them to be far beyond everything that was mine. If I looked within, they were more interior than I was. Then I knew the truth of what I had read, that in them we live and move and have our being. Looking within, looking without, paying attention. My darlings, I always come back to that, I know. Paying attention. It is an excess of paying attention, I assume, that has me confused. Because the more you look, the more you see the interconnections. Where did I put my pencil? Pencil. Oh, pencil. Oh, see, now I'm being tested right in front of you and I'm not capable of finding my pencil. That is so strange. Oh, it's in my book. Thank you. Thus far, it's man one, machine one. I linked the video or a clip from the video because I think I referred only to the longer video on Alex's main channel that I was speaking about yesterday. So shortly after I posted yesterday's YouTube to be released later, that was recommended to me. So that was fun. That was nice. Thank you, algorithm. I do think that's just the algorithm. I don't think there's anything divine behind that. But the man also scored a point. I'm not sure yet if there's something behind that, something divine behind that. I do think it's both. My suspicion is that it's both, or all three. The algorithm, so the machine, the man, and the divine. Because the man made it clear that he likes to watch alternative channels from time to time. So that should not be strange if he does that. And then there are so many things that he could not have possibly orchestrated. Even online. Even just the things online. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. I know that I recently interrupted myself and completely forgot to get back to the esoteric things I was thinking about that day. It was to do with the fact that I think we're living in a time where, like, just before, during, and after the time of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, there were many competing myths making the rounds, many stories, many things happening, and only one was preserved. Who knows why? And we're in that time that there's so many myths, and that should maybe be like reason to chill, because we don't know which myth is gonna make it. Maybe we're just playing a myth that will be forgotten in 5 years. So the best we can do is just have fun. Just enjoy our roles. Don't think too much about what it means, what it could potentially mean. If we are at all remembered, it would most likely, most definitely almost, not be for who we truly are. So just play with it, I would say, and see what happens. It would make sense that she would love him, adore him. He practically grew up in front of her eyes. And he was such a cute baby. I have the day off because there's no Dostoevsky for me to read, and I didn't, and I will not be going to my Socrates cafe because I had a social event on Friday, and yesterday I was with my friend the whole day, so I just want some time alone. So I do have some things that I want to do, mostly around this. We're gonna be the next time we read, we're gonna read the final part of Protagoras, and then we'll be going to Gorgias. So I wanted to also review some of Folly's posts on that, one on Substack and one on YouTube. No, not Substack, Patreon. One on Patreon and one on YouTube. And I'll link both if possible. Next time. Or no, I'll do it now. Although I'll refer to it only next time. Anyways. But I do kind of remember what was said. And that made me remember what I was thinking when I was watching. Then specifically I'm referring to the one on Patreon, where he speaks, maybe he does say that on YouTube as well, I'm not sure, about the book. Oh, I don't have it with me. The book on the first philosophers. And he said it's a great book to dip in and out of. And that sparked, as all things do, an idea for a ritual in my mind at the White Spring. And this morning I remembered that. And I remembered that at the time I actually daydreamed up a ritual that I could participate with, who was then affectionately known as the boys in my mind, without having to be naked with them. I could wear my white dress and sit on the side of the well, the spring. I don't know what it is. It's the big hole in the ground that's filled with icy water. That's why you just dip in and out. It's really cold. And the boys, then known as the boys, could wrap, I don't know practically how that would work, because only the first one would have something dry to wear. But maybe Rebecca has other things that the others can use. My sacred scarf, the scarf that I got from Jerusalem and that I wore in the Sancta Sophia, and that covered me during my second initiation. That's very sacred. That's even more sacred than being naked. So then no one needs to be naked. My scarf is pink now. It used to be white. But I was like, because obviously I washed it with something red. Something new and red. And I was like, oh, you idiot. Why did you do that? But not being too hard on myself. And now I'm actually, because when Rebecca and I went to the White Well, we were both wearing white dresses. And then I had my white scarf, which is pink now, and she had her red rope, which is pink now because it's washed out. So we were both in white and pink, and it was like, oh, maybe it was meant to be pink. I don't know why, but that gave me consolation. It's raining now. The rain used to be, and still is in my mind, a symbol of blessing. Jumping from one thing to the other, though not really. Still with the boys, well, one of them. The thing that makes it super weird and almost absurd, but which I knew for quite some time, and I'm a bit shy to say why, is that whole blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord thing, right? And the only reason why I need to stabilize myself, I think, is because I'm a bit jealous that he doesn't come with me. But that is my thing, my cross to bear, my thing to deal with. And that's why I need to stabilize myself. That's not on him. bit bonkers, but hey. I'm just glad that I'm not carrying that burden. But it's okay. You can do this. And like I said, there are many, many, many myths out there. Who knows which one is going to actualize? So just breathe. Breathe. Sophia herself will guide your way.